with CEOs and millionaires. I've never seen my vision be more crystal clear. Look in the mirror, see the change in who I used to be. I kept going, knew success would come eventually. But ask about me back then, they said I wouldn't make it. Nowadays they doubt less and tend to ask for favors. Poetic music, that's realness, don't let them tell you different. And if you ever lost in doubt, then follow your intuition. These words of wisdom is for those who's trying to find their purpose. Don't be living just to die, cause only death is certain. I'm working hard so I can toast to my accomplishments. Cause see, I lost it all and I ain't been the same since. I'm more focused, more ambitious, more everything. Grew up with nothing, now I appreciate the finer things. I know it's real when at the shows they ask for autographs. And now they know the name, they ain't gotta ask. Yeah.
First of all, thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I know it's a lovely day outside, so it's a warm like 70, 75 degrees here in January in Tel Aviv, and I am speaking with somebody named Julia, or Jules as people call her here in Israel. And first off, we're talking about the process of immigrating from somewhere else to Israel. And Jules did that about 3 years ago. And she will tell you more on her story, but I don't want to give too much of it away in a sense of everything else. So can you first off tell the people who you are, like where you're originally from, and what essentially made you want to move to Israel?
Okay. So thank you for having me. I'm Jules. I was born in Argentina, but actually raised in Brazil. So I moved to Brazil when I was 5. And I lived most of my life in Brazil. And then I was transferred with the company I was working at the time to the States. And I lived there for almost 5 years. And then when the visa was over, I had the choice to go back to Brazil or leave the company. And I really didn't know what to do. I just knew that I did not want to go to Brazil. And then at that moment, I had never, traveled or had like long vacations. So I decided to just travel for a few months until, to decide what I wanted to do next. And that's when my sister called me. She was living here in Israel at the time. And she said, wow, you love Israel so much, why not considering coming to Israel at this time? And she said, oh, and by the way, I'm pregnant. So I felt that it was a great time to move here. And that's what I did. I literally winged it. So decided to come.
What made you not? So where did you live before with where you had to decide if you're going back to Brazil or not with that company?
I was living in Madison, Wisconsin.
It's the metropolitan of the United States.
I have to say that it's not the best weather in the world.
With that, what made you not want to move back to Brazil from the U.S.?
So Brazil, although people are lovely and, lovely weather, and my family lives in Brazil, and I have a lot of friends from, back in college. It is just not a place that I would be able to get used to again after living so many years abroad. I knew that from a career standpoint, it would have been good with the experience I had, but I really didn't like it's not that I didn't like, I just didn't feel like I fit in anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Having moved from Europe to the States, I understand that in a sense of like the culture keeps moving without you.
Yeah.
And so when you go back, you feel less and less connected. You still speak the language. I talked with a guy yesterday about the same thing. He's from the former Soviet Union, grew up speaking Russian in his house. He lived in Israel since he was 4 years old. But then when he connected with like real Russians or Ukrainians or people that speak Russian fluently, he had a big disconnect. He realized how Israeli he actually was. Did you ever have those moments in your life, like traveling away from Brazil, like kind of where you grew up in the US, or in like even here, like where people like you just feel distinctly like who you are, like very, very quickly because of the people around you or the culture differences or anything like that?
I feel that I've changed, and that I am going back to the same place, and I don't feel, I don't know, perhaps, you know, when you move abroad and you go through so many different things in order to get settled, it's a different, you know, life that you have for a while, and that changes you. And then when you go back to a country where people continue to live in and perhaps didn't have that experience, I just feel I'm a different person, and I'm not the same person that I used to be when I was living there. So,
for sure. And when did you leave to move to the States? Like, how old were you?
I was 27.
Okay. So a little older, actually. But I mean...
Yeah.
Do you think that was an advantage or disadvantage coming to the U.S. at this time of your life instead of a little bit younger or even older?
I think it was good. I was in a moment in my career. The company transferred me, so I moved for work. Mm-hmm. And my focus back then was really my career. Perhaps if I was there a little younger, that wouldn't have been the case, or even a little older. Your perspective on how much work means to you and your life really changes. But back then, it was exactly what I needed. Mm-hmm. And there were 5 very good years.
Right. So what do you, having moved twice, what do you miss about the States, being away from the States now for a couple of years?
I miss having access to a lot of things that when you don't live in the States, you don't have access to, like, or at least immediate access, or, you know, it's right there. Anything you need, any kind of weather, any kind of gadget, any kind of, you know, it's life. It's pretty easy in that perspective when you compare to other countries. So I think that's, you know, that's what I miss. But it's not something that I'm like, wow, I'm missing this. You know, it's just different. I was used to a lifestyle that I no longer have access to.
Right. And so with that process of coming here, and maybe can you talk about, I mean, obviously you're Jewish, but what does that mean in relation to becoming Israeli? And then also describe that process of the bureaucracy of getting here and up to the point where you got here.
Okay. So I grew up Jewish. I went to Jewish school. You know, I was part of all the, you know, youth movements and the whole dancing thing, and going to the synagogue every Friday and celebrating all the high holidays. So I was always like very connected to the religion. And I was a guide for Birthright Israel several times. So I knew a lot about the country already. Of course, you know, what you know when you're on the outside is nothing like, you know, living here. But I already had a good taste, and I had siblings living here. So it was not a hard decision to make, to be honest. I woke up one day and I said, you know what, this is it. And because I had a very good friend in the Jewish agency in Brazil, she was able to put together my documents, you know, in 3 weeks. It was pretty fast when you compare to, like the average is, you know, a few months or even longer. But when I made the decision, she said, you know, let's do it. So it was, you know, I decided in early August, and I was here in early September. So it was pretty quick. And I already didn't have a home because I left my home, you know, in the States, and I was just traveling around. So I already had my 2 suitcases.
Yeah.
So yeah, I landed here on September 4th, 2018. And I went straight to my sister's house. So I think if you compare to the average Aliyah process or the immigration process to Israel, it was a pretty easy one because I already had some sort of support system waiting for me.
Yeah.
So
tell me what it, maybe if you can go back for a second and tell me what the difference in Jewish life, like a lot of people from Israel probably think Jewish life is kind of the same around the world outside of Israel. What's the difference from what you saw in the U.S. compared to how you grew up in Brazil as far as diaspora Jewish life? What some of the difference are between the two areas, either in Brazil and the U.S.?
So I think the biggest difference is I grew up conservative. So
like as in a religious sense?
In a religious sense.
Okay.
So when I moved to the States, all the synagogues, the first thing I did, the first time I moved to the States was I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, which is not a huge, Jewish state.
Sorry for that.
Weather was good though. So the first thing I did was to look for a synagogue because that would give me somewhere to start from, start my social life. And all the synagogues that I was able to find were very liberal, were like either another name besides liberal.
There's like Reform
and liberal, yes.
Well, then they have like Conservadox, which is like something. There's a bunch of different sects in the U.S. There's generally just more Reform or conservative places, and then obviously you have the Orthodox, modern Orthodox, ultra Orthodox. But
yeah, I did not look for the Orthodox one like Beit Chabad and all that because that's not what I wanted.
So can you maybe explain the difference between what a conservative congregation would be versus a modern one?
I can give you a few examples. So one is in the conservative, women would never wear talit or the kippot, and women would sit separately from men, right? There's really this very distinctive separation between genders. And when you go to a Reform or a liberal, that's not the case. Everybody together, everybody does their own thing. And you will see female rabbis in the liberal and reformist, when in the conservative, that's not even, an option. So needless to say that it was a shock for me. I'm a woman, but I grew up in this very male-oriented, culture, and I was used to that.
Yeah.
And then the first day I get into the synagogue, there was a female rabbi wearing a talit and a kippah, and I was like, what's going on? What is this?
It's Purim.
So it was quite a shock. It took me, I have to say, a little bit to get used to it, but eventually, yeah.
What was so shocking about it, though? Was it just because you just didn't grow up around like ultra liberal, like Jewish congregations, or it was weird? Like what was the?
It felt like the two ends of a spectrum. Like I've never seen that before. I didn't even think it was an option. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then when I saw it, I said, did I get into the right place? Is this even a synagogue? I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I just wasn't used to not having that many rules around, Judaism and what it meant to be a Jew and go to the synagogue to pray.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, but having moved here, and there's like every spectrum of Judaism, the one thing that this place lacks is, you would think about it, is Reform Judaism. And the fact that you have a very big base of Reform Jews in the U.S. you can't find a Reform synagogue here.
No. And it's funny because when I moved away from Raleigh and I moved to Madison, there were even less, synagogues in the area. But I was able to find one, and it was a male rabbi. And I'm like, okay,
back to normal.
Back to normal. But then he takes a guitar and starts singing the prayers. And I said, okay, what is going on? So I have to say that those 5 years, being a Jew for 5 years in the States was like a discovery moment.
And I'll just give a shout out to Michal Uziyahu, who told us, she was our old shlicha in Denver, and she used to say, I came as an Israeli and I left as a Jew because it was so different than anything she knew in that way. She thought she knew, like, being religious and having these experiences and just seeing the diversity in the community and the different demographics that, like, for example, Denver has, like we go from, you'll see, it's very interesting. You'll see there's two different distinct old Jewish neighborhoods in Denver. They used to be on the outskirts of Denver, and now they're just, getting overdeveloped and overpopulated. But like on Saturday nights, you'll see like black hats, like walking a very main street area, right? This is the west side. It's called Colfax. And you'll see all the old schwitzes and all the other stuff that's slowly getting like demolished and whatever, but you still see the remnants of those communities around. And then from that side, and then you have the places where I go to like Temple Sinai, which is like in the south side of town, away from like Denver proper, like the city, but there's it's Reform, like you were saying, and go in there and there's a choir. There's freaking like a cantor, female. There's everything. It's very egalitarian. In that sense. And it was interesting bringing Israelis to that during the high holidays because they're not used to not only the lack of rules, but a little bit of the flashiness that comes with being Jewish in the States, right? And so like you're wearing nice jewelry, you're wearing suits, you're wearing all this stuff, and like people from other countries, just same as you, are just like, what is going on here?
Right. And I used to work, when I was working in Madison, I would fly, I was always in between Madison and Toronto. I'll be in Toronto every month for work. And of course, I'll go to the synagogue on a Friday. And it's kind of a similar vibe. And there's this restaurant next to the synagogue that is called Jerusalem. And everybody would go, So yeah, it was interesting. But going to your first comment about, the difference that you don't see that in Israel, I feel that throughout these years, being in the, moving from the Judaism in Brazil, then to the States, and then here, I have to agree that I'm a Jew. It doesn't matter the way that the synagogue celebrates, Shabbat or the high holidays. Is really about how you feel. And I don't go as often to a synagogue ever since I moved. And it's funny, I feel I don't have to because I'm already here. And every time that I feel that I want to really, pray, or I would just go to Jerusalem and sit in front of the Western Wall. And that's my synagogue for me.
Okay. When you got here, you obviously had a little bit of a network already set up for family and everything else. Like, what do you feel that the Israeli government did right for you, or had some challenges accommodating somebody like you that's coming mid-30s, professional, single, things like that in that sense, to come here and to, one, make sure that you're welcomed, two, to make sure that you can integrate into society as fast as possible to be the most effective for the community? Did you feel that they did a really good job? Do you think they could do some improvements on the process or anything else in the time that you've been here?
So it was, to get all the documentation was very easy. Once you land, you get it all.
Mm-hmm.
You can even change your name if you want immediately, after you land, to anything. I did not do that. I still have my name. So that part, so you get your, your bank account, you get your social security, you get your health insurance, and even some money, and they pay for your cab to your first destination.
Nice little perk. Thank you,
Yes.
Israeli government. The Ministry of Absorption,
Yes.
courtesy.
It's really.
What if you live in like Eilat?
They would send you there.
Oh, okay.
They would send you there. Yeah. A bunch of people, come and go to Jerusalem or Haifa, or they would pay whatever it takes to go there. My sister lived in Ranana, so it wasn't a cheap taxi fare, but anyway. So that part was good. And they also give you quick access to the Hebrew classes, so you can start as soon as you land.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good, and you can do it for a couple of semesters for free. But that's when it ended. I feel like the support from the government. I felt, and they give you like an amount, a sum of money for 6 months too, which is not enough to survive, but it's something to get you started. But that's as much as I got from, support from the government itself. The support that I really, really got from the Israelis here, they really want you to stay. Every Israeli that I met along the way was very, very supportive and helped me with anything that I needed. So the people is, the people are very warm.
Mm.
And I was coming from living in the States, for several years, and it was not the same welcoming. It was very different. It was like, you're part of the society now. That's what I felt. It was good. But after that, I had to be on my own. I was pretty much on my own.
It's kind of a big cliff. Do you think that this is the right way to handle immigration? Because if you think about it conceptually from other places, you get about the same kind of service, right? Like it's kind of an adventure. It's kind of a leap of faith in some ways to move from one part of the world to another, to hopefully have better opportunities, if not for yourself, then for your family.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about the way that the U.S. handles it in just the same way, and it's like kind of a similar situation where you might have a family member or something there before you get there. You have all your documentation, but it's generally on you. Mm-hmm. Like you have to sink or swim very, very quickly. Is that the best approach in general for immigration? And is that the right approach, you think, for Israel, or do you think there could be different ways to handle it?
I think it's hard to generalize because each person has a different personal situation. Some people need more support. Some people don't want to. Some people just want to go on their own and figure it out. But
do you think like there maybe should be some kind of assessment process with the Jewish agency from wherever you're at, based on your socioeconomic level, your religious level, like to be able to at least pair you up with a community in Israel in the right way?
Yeah, that did not happen. What I had was a quick chat with somebody from that would help me understand the market, the professional market.
Mm-hmm.
And he reviewed my CV, and that was it.
Yeah.
But when I was in this meeting, they told me to look for a few organizations that are they're non-governmental organizations that support immigrants that come kind of in a similar situation as myself, from a professional standpoint. So they did point me in the right direction, but they did not help further.
Do you feel that if you were making, for example, the decision to make Aliyah, and you're coming from the Americas and you have a proficiency in English per se, do you feel that like to make that process easier that maybe you should already have a job lined up, or do you need to do that here?
I think that if you have a job lined up, it really, really helps you to get settled. It's kind of as soon as I got my job, I felt, okay, I'm in Israel. I'm good. I'm standing up on my feet.
But do you think that process should happen before you get here or after?
So I started that process before, I got here. But most of the companies, because there are so many people that are willing to move to Israel and they end up not moving for several reasons, they don't want to make any commitments until you have the documentation ready, at least, and then you're moving here. Would it help to have a job lined up? Absolutely, yes, 100%. Is it easy? No, but not because of the government. It's because the companies in general are not willing to do that. Now, it might have changed in the last couple of years because the market here is so hot and they need more people to come. But when I moved a little bit over 3 years ago, they were not open to do that.
With that being said, obviously you had an idea of kind of what field you wanted to go into, or at least the industry per se. Like the kind of common things that people think about when they're in the States, like home ownership's kind of a big deal in the US. Does that even come to mind when you're making that change to move to Israel? Like, yeah, I would love to own my own apartment at some point. Do they even give you the idea of that, like during that process or not, or how that would work and anything else?
One of the benefits that new immigrants get is lower rates for
purchasing homes.
Got it. With the bank. So if you need any kind of loan to buy a house or even a car, you would get a lot lower rates than
the average person.
Yes.
Is there any other benefits that they give you, like on a sheet on like, yeah, you can buy a house, or you get discount rates at car dealers, or this place is like, how is that system ultimately set up for you as you, you're going through that process? You're just kind of, you've done it twice. How's that process look in Israel for that thing to kind of set everything up, or you just kind of figure things out as they go?
So the Jewish agency does provide a list of benefits, but it's not like, and if you go to the Ministry of Absorption here, you can discuss that with someone, but it's not really centralized. Like they end up sending you to very different places to get, what you are interested in. But you do know what benefits are available to you. It's just up to you to go after them. Like they're not going to just give it to you.
Right. Yeah, it would be counterproductive for the government to like make sure you know all the benefits. It's very similar, I think, to the way the veteran affairs are in the States. Like there's tons of these programs and benefits for veterans to be able to utilize, but you have to do the research on your own. And then always the kind of the middle ground, like the VA doesn't want to tell every single person about all these programs all the time. They put it on a massive website with a bunch of things here and there, and you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then the same time goes where like you have to meet the programming halfway. If you're really into something, you have to figure out like how to get from that point A to point B. I think for a lot of people, maybe it correlates, maybe it doesn't. When you've been in an environment, let's say you're coming from Brazil, where a lot of things are kind of done for you by the government, right? Like you work, you do your thing, you participate, you pay your taxes, and then the services are then coming back down to you in that way. Same thing with like military veterans, right? And then you put them in kind of a system or a market when they leave, like the military, for example, where they need that guidance because they've been told what to do, where to go, how to do it their entire time. So it could be like 5-10 years, right, of this. And then it's just like, if you don't want to wake up at 8 a.m. to go to work, you don't have to. But at the same time, you could lose your job. You know what I mean? Like the ramifications for error are a lot different when you are starting out fresh in a transition period in your life, because you're kind of deprogramming from one situation to another.
But I think that, to your point, when you compare to, for example, the veterans in the US, I'm not saying one is better than the other. What I'm saying is, when you immigrate to Israel and if you don't speak the language, that's 10 times worse. Like you really don't understand what is going on.
And if in worst case, if you don't even speak English at a proficient level,
that's even worse. That's very complicated, because if you have a certain level of English, you have access to better jobs even. Like anywhere in the world. Okay, if you speak English in a non-English speaking country, you will get better jobs. So that's not different here. But if you move here without the Hebrew and without the English, then things get very complicated.
Really behind.
Yes.
Is there, obviously you came at a certain point in your life where you felt you could take that leap and come here and take that chance to come here. Is there a certain point in life, if you are thinking about moving to Israel from the outside to come here, is there a certain time frame where you think that it's just probably not beneficial for you to come here as a person? Obviously, it's very dependent on the person, but I'm talking about age, potential earnings, things like that, where it's the opportunity to be living a, not even a comfortable life, but just an average life here would go down very, very fast. When you're talking about the language barrier, you're talking about other factors, in assimilating that much quicker. Do you think there's a certain time, and does Israel want people after a certain age or a certain time frame where they can't be trained to do other things to help society in some way? Is there kind of a cutoff, do you think, with immigrating to Israel for people around the world?
I've seen everything. Even though, I mentioned that my process was fairly quick, it wasn't easy either, right? It wasn't. It took me a couple of years to feel that I was really here, and I was okay. I've seen families moving. I've seen, older folks moving. I don't really have an opinion on that. I've seen everything, and I've seen people that had, my kind of profile and suffered a lot more, and people that didn't. And I think it's all about the mindset that you come with. Like if you understand that Israel is the Holy Land, and it's amazing, and there are a lot of good things here for you, but you need to understand that it's not gonna be easy. And if you come with that mindset, resilient, then you can make it at any time.
Yeah. What do you think that immigrants add to the flavor of the culture here?
Wow. I have to think about that one. I think that we bring a lot of skills that don't exist here. For example, the several languages. We're able to open markets for Israel, abroad, because we know that market, because we speak that language, because we have connections on the other side. And it brings, but yeah, I think that's it. Can I come back to you on that one?
I think you're allowed to come back to it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll remember to ask you at the end.
Thank you. It's a lot. deep question.
I think maybe just to add to it, maybe it'll get your thoughts going. I think there's a certain level of humility that the immigrants bring that maybe that Israelis like Sabras forget about when they get here. And so you're talking about the cultural differences that you're bringing value to as far as from an economic standpoint, but in the same time, I think that most of the people like yourself, like other people that I know that made Aliyah in some way, they bring a humbleness into the society where you have a lot of winners in the society, and I think it perpetuates this. There's a confidence, and then there's arrogance here, and it's very thin. Like there's some really confident people, but they pull back to make sure that they don't cross over that line. But there's a lot of people here that don't. And I think when you bring other people from outside constantly in, and you're having to work through somebody like you because they don't speak Portuguese or they don't speak Spanish, and it frustrates them that you might have an edge on them in some way, right? But it brings them back down to, I don't know everything. And I think that is a big component to the success, but then the appreciation of people coming here because you have a skill set in different ways that they don't have. Dealing with war, they got that. Dealing with security and making sure the country stays safe, they don't need you for that. To call somebody in Sao Paulo or Rio or someplace to make an introduction for something else in a way that they just they could probably fumble through it and get there, but they don't know the cultural nuances in the same way that you would. So that's that aspect of it where it reminds people of the necessity to appreciate the diversity. I think is important, and
that there is a world out there.
For sure, you get very, very big tunnel vision here in some ways, where you forget that there's people on the other side. That comes from economics. That comes from also from I think from dealing with the conflict here in many ways, and having a misunderstanding on many reasons, on putting things in very black and white, and you just can't live like that, because at some point maybe that turns on you where you become the black instead of the white, Yeah.
100%.
With moving here, you've been here for three years now, like, what value does it bring to you in your life to be in a Jewish state, to be around the majority, or at least quasi-majority of a Jewish country, with the religious aspect of it also, but like the culture around you every day, as opposed to living in the outside world?
Well, I think that being the majority is something that I've never been before. Like when you live in the diaspora, people ask you, "Oh, you're Jewish? What does that mean? But how can you be Jewish and Brazilian? Or how can you, there is like a misconception or lack of knowledge, really, of what being a Jew means. And just being able to really not have to explain that for a few years now, it's really freeing. I like the feeling of being safe. That's what I mean is on a day-to-day, like, I really, really feel safe. When you live in Latin America and you're a woman, you don't really feel that every day. So it's really something that it's very important for me. And in general, for people that move here, I think it's something that really brings the value, and when you're struggling, you just think back and say, no, this is worth it because of that and other things. I think that I had to grow up a lot and very fast.
Yeah.
When I went to the States, I went with the company. The company provided everything for me. Like everything was done for me. They even paid for housing, car, It was a completely different immigration process. And when I came here, I had to do it all and really build the network around me. And that's the biggest learning, is that you're alone, but you're not. You need people around you. And it really made me a better human being in general, more rounded, more aware of everything.
Like a lot of people that grow up here, about 40% of the total population serve in the military at some capacity. Do you feel like you not being here during those times has hindered your progress in like integrating into the society, or has it been a detriment to maybe potentially getting jobs that you were applying for, things like that?
So I've been back and forth on that one. I think that when you are Israeli and you go to the army and you grow up around, the people that also did that, you have a connection that you're not going to have with people that didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about my surroundings and my friends and my network in general, I barely have any Israelis like close to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think two things. One, perhaps the army. Second, the language, right? Because I have not mastered, I'm not even close actually to mastering Hebrew. So yeah, there are some cultural differences of how you grew up and what you know. But I don't think it did anything to my ability to get a good job and integrate into society in that way.
To be fair, you do know 3 other languages pretty much fluently, so I think you get a little bit of a pass to get. I'm working on my 4th language, and I just can't get it. I just can't get it as fast as the others.
Right.
That's such a Yehudi thing to say. Yeah, no, it's I've seen that too. I thought about moving here about a decade ago, but for different reasons. I was kind of looking for something meaningful. And I was gonna like really push to maybe try to join the army late. Like you can get exemptions to do it in your 30s if you really, really wanted to in some way. It's very rare, but it can happen based on your experience. And I thought about it, and like I just remember talking with friends, talking with family, and I was just like, they're like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, you've already moved from one place to another. You were already in an army. Now you're going to join another army." In a sense of the conditions of that particular job and career or whatever is going to be absolute opposite of what you had. You were at the very pinnacle in some ways of a career and this and that, and then moving and coming here in that way. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? So
then you gave up.
It's not that I gave up. It was just one of those things where it's like, why am I going? What am I doing? And I'll be honest, like my local community was more than enough for what I needed. I do better in being on the outside than being on the inside as far as living up to a certain level of values and standards and being able to represent my community, either being in Denver or veterans or anything else, in the greater good of those communities, like in Colorado, but then in the U.S. specifically, and then also being a kind of a bridge between partnerships here and there and stuff like that. Like I have amazing friends here, and it's always very, very tough to leave, per se, especially been here almost 2 months now. But at the same time, you know, like my mission and my work, I do a better job of doing that overseas and being able to be something of a value add on that side of the pond.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, sometimes. So after being here for 3 years now, you've seen a lot. There's been quite a lot that has gone on here. Are you an optimist? Are you a realist? Are you a pessimist about the current political climate, the current security situation, the current economic situation here in Israel?
I'm always an optimist.
Okay. Can you elaborate on your optimism, on why you feel like everything is kind of on a good slope here going on?
I don't think it's a good slope. I can't define it as good. I can't define it as getting better.
In what way?
I've seen, you know, from the moment I stepped into the country to this day, I feel, again, in the Israel that I know, that I, you know, being in Tel Aviv, you don't get to see much more than that if you don't want to. But I'm seeing progress. And again, I'm coming from a place where, you know, if I need to compare progress here and progress in Brazil, the country has been going backwards. Brazil, I mean.
Right.
And here I see that, you know, things are progressing. People are, you know, getting better. The economy. I decided not to talk about politics in general. Because I don't think I know enough to be able to have an intelligent conversation about it. Yeah, but from an economical safety standpoints, I see progress. I've progressed with it. So
yeah, I you know, as far as the politics are concerned, I'm more going along the lines of like there've been some major changes. You know, here. I mean, you've been a part of probably a couple of those votes, even per se. Three out of the 4. It's pretty good. Yeah. That's pretty Israeli of you.
I never voted in my entire life because I was always an immigrant. And this is the first time in my life after, you know, I'm in my 30s that I'm actually able to vote.
Oh, because you were an Argentinian citizen in Brazil?
And then Brazilian or Argentinian in the States. So I was always far away, like far enough not to be required to vote for my country. So
that's funny.
Yeah. In 1 year, I voted 3 times here. So,
yeah, I mean, what a dog and pony show that was. In a sense of, I just remember talking with friends about it, getting their take on it because it was unprecedented. It was basically somebody clinging on to power at all cost and breaking down the government just to make sure that they can vote again and do like the reshuffling and the realignment of the parties to make sure that they still stay in power. But it took a toll, I think, mentally on the people overall. Did you feel, what was the environment like during that time? Were you just like kind of emotionally spent on, or was it just like you felt like it was a duty that you have to do and you're going to show up and do it and then go back to work? And
so I hope this doesn't speak badly of me, but the first time I did my research, because it was the first time in my life that I was going to vote, right? So I said, I'm going to, you know, really look this up. Yeah. And I feel that I did a not very, but like kind of an educated decision. Mm-hmm. And then the second time came and I said, okay, don't know really what's going on, but okay, I'm going to do it, you know, as the country that has taken me in. And then the third time came and I said, I felt it was kind of a joke.
And you just got here.
Right?
That's probably when you felt Israeli. You're like, this third vote, and you're like,
what is
fuck
going
it.
on? Exactly. Here, there it is.
You're just like smacking the box. Hope I never fucking see you again.
So I was like coming from like a very, yeah, I'm going to do this, and then a little bit, and then no. Like, this is... and then when you talk to Israelis about it, they make it a lot of, they make fun of it.
Yeah, of course.
So the information that you receive is that, this is a joke. Just, you don't even go, just take the day off.
Yeah.
Go to the beach.
Obviously that was quite an ordeal, but living outside the United States for 3 years, I mean, you missed most of the Trump time frame. Can you compare having to vote 3 times versus the coming of the Trump era in the US? I mean, you lived there during a very interesting time in the United States history.
Yeah.
Obviously not being able to vote, but feeling the environment and how that shaped things. And obviously Wisconsin is one of those.
It was a wing.
Like a swing
swing
state.
State, yes.
So living in an area like that had to been kind of intense in some ways, because people are uber polarizing when it comes to Wisconsin. You live there, I haven't. If I can recall, is a lot of manufacturing, a lot of big agro farming, a lot of these places where people have had smaller businesses that got eaten up by these big corporations that are doing this, crazy macro farming, basically.
And then moving those factories to a different country.
Right. So you've got a lot of pissed off people.
A lot.
And for the people that listen, right, like, most of those places that were smaller farmers that had these factories, they generally voted democratically in the US, right? But they got them nowhere in the grand scheme of things, and they like literally lost their entire job or their entire career, or their entire business that might have been in a family for, 50 years, 100 years, something like that. Living there in that time frame, or seeing okay, you had the buildup of the Trump time, and then leaving there at were you there when Trump actually got elected?
Oh yeah. I remember it.
I mean, everybody remembers it. But like, what was that? I mean, it was a crazy time, because not only was Trump getting elected, Bolsonaro from Brazil came into power at the same time. You're dealing with somebody of a similar character here. It seems like everywhere you went, you had a kind of a strongman, authoritarian type of leader in those countries. Did you feel a little bit like obviously everybody felt like, what is going on? But in particular, like for you, it's like, I can't win. Like going back here, it's like one thing. Staying in the States and living in the same kind of environment, probably not the most ideal place to be as an immigrant during that time, and how people viewed you in the sense of, okay, this person has talent, but she took somebody else's job that could have been somebody else's here.
Yeah, so that was interesting that you're bringing this up. I had forgotten, or I tried to.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's my job. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know. I'm not mad. What I remember when Trump, won, and it was actually Wisconsin that made it happen.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, what a moment to be alive, and the place to be. People don't talk about, at least, in the corporate environment, they refrain from talking about politics. So the next day, it was business as usual.
It's like, how could you not?
I said, how can you not talk about this? Like, this is a huge change for this country, for the world, really. But that was the main reason, the reason that my visa was not
Renewed
was because he immediately changed the immigration and the visa requirements.
Yeah.
They, even for green cards and things like that, it got a lot harder. And that's when the company decided to say, okay, we're not going to renew this. Like, go back and live in Brazil. And then I said, and they actually gave me an amazing position. They said, you're going to be like very much more senior. But then Bolsonaro was there, and I said, how can I ever do this?
Do you think?
So, yeah. Bad memories.
But do you feel like you understand at least why people would vote for somebody like him? Like, wasn't the votes like for Bolsonaro or Trump? Weren't they like kind of a fuck you to like establishment?
Correct. That was it. They said
it wasn't like it was like a real candidacy or anything like that. No. It's just like, listen,
I can't do this anymore. Let's try this one.
Right.
That was it.
And obviously, those from a political standpoint, it kind of backfired because not a lot got done during the time frame, right?
No.
Overall, the tax cuts got done for the states, but that was for
and the companies stopped moving jobs to Mexico.
Right, like one or two.
Yeah. I did that myself, by the way.
You moved the company?
Yeah.
That's a weird. So, like, obviously that kind of thing sucks to do at any level.
Yeah.
Do you think people took it harder because you weren't American?
100%.
Do you feel like your company put you in that position deliberately?
100%, yes.
Because it was like easier for them to have, not that they didn't have a say in it, right? But you're the like they say, the mouthpiece in boxing, right? Like everybody's emotional vomit is coming at you.
Yeah. I closed the site in Toronto, the one that I was going every month. I had to close it. And then I had to close the plant in Watertown, Wisconsin. If you haven't been there, don't.
There's not much there.
There's not much, yes. But I had to close that plant and move to the operation to Ciudad Juarez.
Literally across the border.
Literally. And because I spoke Spanish, it was also, an asset for them. And then they said, goodbye.
Yeah, I was going to mention that in a sense of with the with companies like that, do you feel like, having lived in very different systems, like from economics, do you feel that the capitalist system needs some changes to be more effective, in a sense of profit over people is probably the main one?
Well, the world tried the other way around, didn't it? It didn't work.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a family that always told me that I should not be the victim, that I should not accept being a victim, and then whatever happens to me, I need to just stand up and try again. So I try not to, go over, the things that could be different. Mm-hmm. I try to be different myself and try again in a different way, and until it works.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, but then, you have here, do you feel that like being in a more socialist economy gives you less fear to take chances?
Where?
Like here, like in Israel. Like, do you feel that people have more confidence in like taking a big risk because they know that theoretically they're not going to starve, or they're not going to, they're going to have medicine, they're going to have the basics?
Not because it's socialist, but because it's better structured in that way. Like in Brazil, if you lose your job, you're doomed.
Yeah.
It's very hard to save money, right? It's very hard to build something for yourself. Unless, of course, you come from already a good, economic
background,
which is not, many people. But yeah, here, like, that you would have some, government support to keep you going. And to be honest, when, the whole pandemic situation hit, I could see people struggling in Brazil, while here the government was almost paying your full salary.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that before, ever.
A functioning government?
A functioning government, yes.
It's in some capacity.
Yes, at least at that one capacity.
This Brazilian Israeli is approved the COVID time.
Oh no, and there's the Argentinian government as well. Let's not get there.
Who's the president and the husband and wife duo?
Who cares?
That like pass it back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, Argentina probably owes checks to everybody.
Yeah. Again, it's all about perspective, right?
So living through being that, obviously you've been here, you came here just to live a little bit of life, and then the world kind of turned upside down about a year and a half later when you got here. Tell me a little bit about going through COVID from here versus going through COVID from the outside, and hearing what you heard from family and friends from like Brazil, the US, and how it was different here for you.
So the biggest difference is that the government here in Israel was all about the vaccine, and the Brazilian government was not. So there was, again, I'm not saying who's right or wrong.
Right.
I'm not my opinion that matters here. It's just, it was really two opposites. And the information that you would get here was completely different than the information you would get there. It was clearly very, very biased. So that was the biggest difference. When I decided to get the vaccine, I already had the second when my friends didn't even have the first, and so there was a lot of people in Brazil felt hopeless, really. They said, okay, this is it. This is the end. While here, I didn't feel that. The government was, taking care of everybody. So that was a big difference. I also had, a very good job already at the time. The company was very supportive as well. So, they didn't terminate anybody. They didn't close any business. Quite the opposite. They IPO'd, during the pandemic. So from that perspective, I feel very lucky, very, very lucky. And I was able to help, to support my family during that tough time in Brazil. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. From the outside looking in, I know that here it seemed like they took a more proactive approach, and you have to give credit where credit is due. Like Prime Minister Netanyahu definitely secured those vaccines, at least early on, to be able to vaccinate the country. And I just remember, I can't remember when exactly, like they opened up again, and like as long as you had the vaccines, you could kind of go live a normal life again here.
I think it was around June, July. Perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. So like with that, like we're still kind of opening up in Denver. I remember that. And then I left to go back to work. So I kind of missed a lot of the ups and downs and the emotional swings that many people faced.
Yeah.
Because my life didn't change. But I felt bad for people that, like, it became so politicized, and then it became about money.
Yes.
And so with that, what really, really irked me was they're calling it a vaccine. It's not really a vaccine, because like when we take the polio vaccine, we're never going to get polio.
Correct. But yeah.
But
let's not get scientific here, but
no. I'm talking about in a sense of like how you're describing things, right? So if it's a shot to prevent you from getting sick or whatever else, I think the truth needs to be told, and people need to be honest about that. Like there could be other side effects as far as like you having to get a booster or something like that. Like none of that stuff was really discussed in that sense. and a sense of progress on the vaccine itself.
I think they didn't really know.
Yeah. And so
they didn't really know.
how did the government here treat people that didn't want to get vaccinated? Was it like a political thing? Was it more like, hey, we've given you all the information, but it's ultimately up to you to decide if you want this or not based on your own beliefs and things like that? Or
No. There was a lot of pressure. I think that they built the propaganda somehow of making the own population to pressure those that didn't want to get the vaccine.
Got it.
You know, companies started to say you can't come to the office, and they couldn't terminate people really, but
you could make their life uncomfortable
to the point that they would have to leave.
Right.
So there was, if I felt a little bit like, you know, back in the 40s, 30s, 40s, when they would really manipulate
the employees to
do it, and it got to a point where I couldn't go to the gym to work, to meet my friends. Were like, you know, I was dating somebody at the time, and he said, you know, I have an old father. If you don't vaccinate, I don't think we can continue to be together because I care too much about him.
Right.
And things like that. So it started, people really didn't know what this was, but the only thing they needed to know is like, okay, you're vaccinated or not, we can hang out or not.
Right.
So all of a sudden your social life was up in the air.
Yeah. And here, that's a big deal, obviously. So.
It is, yeah. Especially when you're an immigrant and everything you have is your social life, your friends, you know, your job.
Yeah. As you're still progressing in this adventure, what do you still want to accomplish as an immigrant? What kind of legacy do you want to leave, or impression do you want to leave with yourself to the country or anything else?
So I feel that I'm in a place of privilege right now. I have a very good job. I live in a very good apartment in a very good neighborhood, and I have amazing friends around me. So my lifestyle, and like I feel safe, I feel happy. I think that this country has done a lot for me. I definitely want to give it back. And I'm working, you know, some ideas of how to do that. But I feel that Israel in general is, I'm used to say that it's a Brazil that works. And the reason that I say that is because people are happy, people are, you know, social and warm, and they truly, truly care about you. Everyone that I've met, you know, in some way or another, you know, try to help me if I needed. But there's some structure built around it, and unfortunately, my country doesn't have that. The other country,
the countries,
the other countries, yes. But yeah, everyone that talks to me about, you know, making Aliyah, immigrating to Israel, I make sure that I provide both sides of the situation, but at the same time, I say, you know, overall, it is a great decision to make.
Would you be honest with them if you didn't feel that way?
Yeah. I was. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I was. But again, I didn't have enough time in the country to really make an accurate assessment. When I moved, I said, I'm going to stay at least 2 years, because there's no way that you can really understand a place, a country, or a culture with less time than that.
Right.
And now I can say that, yeah, are there things that bother me? Yes, plenty. But that was the case in the States. That was the case in Brazil. That was the case in Argentina. You will always have things that you disagree with, or that don't help, or that you would like to be different. But you either accept them, you help to change it, or you leave. And it's up to you to make that decision. Today, if you ask me, would you move away? I would say no. Today, no.
Fair enough. And what advice would you give people that are maybe thinking about moving to Israel in the near future? Would you suggest to them, I don't know, obviously there's programs like Nefesh B'Nefesh and things like that kind of help you, but what are some of the things that you wish you knew that weren't really explained to you until you got here that maybe you would want somebody else to know?
The biggest one is use your network. Build a network and use the people that you are connected with. Use not in a bad sense, right? Use is like getting, taking advantage of already having people in the land that are in a good position to help you. When, a great example that I can give is, when in Israel, if you ask someone to refer you to a job or anything else, they're glad to do it. They really are looking forward to make that connection. It's a point of pride. In other countries, people might be, I don't know, because my reputation might be on the line, and they might not be as helpful or open to help. Here's the opposite. And it's hard to understand that. Like, it took me a while to really, can I really ask this person to help me? Should I? Is it gonna come back?
Was that an issue for you when you were transitioning jobs?
What do you mean?
Like, did you not use your network enough, you feel? Or you mean initially when you first get here?
It was in the initial.
Okay.
Yeah. No, when I changed jobs last time, it was all about my network for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah.
No, it makes
that's
sense.
my biggest recommendation is, if you already have somebody that has a network, connect to that person and get that network for you as well. That will help you get up on your feet very, very quickly.
Yeah, totally. On that note, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
It was interesting hearing your perspective on moving across the planet, and hopefully
and not speaking the language.
Yeah, other people hopefully can get something out of it. And if they're deciding, is it cool if people were able to contact you and know more about how to do things to get here?
100%.
Yalla. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. The show is produced by myself, Ben, out of Denver, Colorado. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you consume the content. Audio versions are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and a ton of others. As far as the full shows go and clips of the show, YouTube is the best place to view it. Instagram would be another one to see the clips. Big shout out to Mike Xavier, a hip-hop artist based out of Vegas and LA, who allow us to use his music for the show. He also produces a show called Hip Hop and Poetry, owns Renowned Photos, and check his music out and anything else that he's got going on in Vegas or online and social media as well. One last thing, if you know someone interesting that you think would bring value to the audience in some way, by all means, email me or get in touch via social media, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on who would be one of those type of people. Thanks so much, and look forward to continuing to produce for you guys.